So what is best practices? And to address this, I want to bring up a topic which I'm not sure if I covered last time. I don't remember. It was called SRI. Did I talk about SRI last time? System of Rice Intensification.
Oh, yes.
Madagascar. Maybe.
I remember that.
Yes?
Yes.
I'm getting one yes and a bunch of no's. Or blank looks at least. Either way, it bears repeating. I think it's an important metaphor, and it really basically takes you home from this, what I've just been sharing. So quick story, anecdote, not anecdote, it's a story. The story goes, there was a French Jesuit priest who was on his mission to convert the savages in Madagascar. This is in the 90s, I believe. Late 80s, early 90s. And so he goes out, he gets set up, and he, has his route and does his converting of the savages, shtick. He's on his mission. It's a 7-year mission. At the end of it, he's getting ready to pack up and go home, and he has a little chat with God, and God says, you haven't really done anything of consequence here. You've really been entirely, or Jesus says, I'm not sure who it is, Jesus, whatever. He has a moment, and he thinks about what he's actually done in his time. He realizes it's been nothing of great consequence, and rededicates himself to his mission and says, I'm going to stay until I can do something of consequence. This is the story. And so he goes out to the people who he's been living in amongst, and asks them for the first time, is there anything I can do to help? I see that life is not optimal for you guys. Is there anything I can do to help? They're like, yeah, if you could help us figure out how to get a little more food, that'd be really helpful. We're really hungry. We don't have enough food. We can't raise enough food on our land to feed ourselves. We go through drought periods or dry periods where it's a famine season. And so he says, all right, let me see if I can help, and starts going around and looking at things, talking to people, seeing what's going on, thinking, experimenting, has his own little garden, and this process sort of evolves over a few years that is now formally called SRI, System of Rice Intensification, which is, I think, one of the most amazing global grassroots farmers movements that extant. It's affecting millions of people in dozens of countries and dozens of languages, millions of hectares. No one's ever heard of it. It requires almost nothing being bought. It's all being transferred word of mouth. No NGOs really are spreading it. It's all word of mouth. It's really, really exciting, from Morocco to Malaysia, I'd say. There's some information out there on the web, you can find it, but it's not a lot. But the basic principles, what's basically being shared, the insights that were discerned. So in Madagascar, rice is their main staple crop. So a startup called System of Rice Intensification, but then the basic principles are actually applicable to plants of all sorts. And so it's not called SCI, System of Crop Intensification. The global record yield for rice production ever, anywhere, pounds per hectare or whatever, kilograms per hectare, was on an SRI plot. The global record for potato production, most potatoes grown pounds in an acre ever, anywhere, was on an SCI plot. You can actually massively increase yields through a couple of really simple practices, which are in line with everything I've just been saying. So when it comes to the rice, what are some of the basic things they did? For starters, there's a couple basic things. They have been using inoculants, whether it's a compost or some sort of a spore inoculant. They've been inoculating the seed. Most importantly, what they've been doing is traditionally they would take 6-week-old seedlings and transplant them into the paddy field. 2 or 3 seedlings in clumps, in little clumps, on say 4-inch centers. About 6-week-old seedlings. They found that somewhere between 12 and 14 days is actually a much better age for the seedlings we put in. And instead of doing, 3 every 4 inches, they're doing 1 every 12 inches. So they're dramatically decreasing the plant population density, and they're dramatically decreasing the age of the seedling that's being put in. When it comes to rice, one other thing that's being done is they're not flooding the paddies anymore. The only reason you flood the paddies is because rice is a functional anaerobe, and weeds are not functional anaerobes. And if you have no air in the soil for long enough, all the weeds will die, and you don't have to go do any weeding. But just because rice is a functional anaerobe does not mean rice is preferably an anaerobe. It would prefer to have air in the soil. And so when you cover the soil with water and you get all the oxygen out, all the soil that dies, and the rice is stressed for a while. It doesn't die like the weeds do, but it is stressed. So the other thing they've been doing with rice is not flooding the paddies, which you could argue decreases the need for water and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, what happens when you put these 6-week-old seedlings in at 3 to 4 inch spacing is each one ends up growing up and making 1 or 2 of these things called tillers, which is the head with the seeds on it, right? 3 to, say, 10 tillers per clump. These rice plants that are put in younger, that never experience a boundary, into more optimal environment where they don't experience stress, are having, literally in some cases, hundreds of tillers per plant. They've got, plants with 300 tillers, plants with 500 tillers. In many cases, it's only maybe 4 or 5 dozen tillers. But the plants that are put into more optimal environmental conditions are able to more realize their inherent potential. Actually, functionally what occurs is you dramatically increase the yield per unit space by putting in younger seedlings farther apart. So this flies entirely in the face of John Jevons. I apologize. I think the double digging is great if you don't mind the initial level of effort. Functionally what you're doing is you're increasing the amount of air in the soil, which is critically important, and mixing all the minerals in and mixing the compost in and not diluting it. It's a really good thing to do, but my understanding is your yield potential actually increases as you give plants more space to manifest their full potential. There's a book, I've got it here, it's not laid out yet, called How to Grow World Record Tomatoes. I may have passed it out last time for people to look at. This guy growing world record tomatoes was growing literally 1 tomato every 5 feet, 1 tomato at the wall, 1 tomato here, 1 tomato here, 1 tomato there. So what, 5 tomato plants between these 2 walls? Or maybe 4. In this case he had 4 tomato plants on 5-foot spacing, and he was produced 1,320 pounds of fruit in those 4 plants, right? 300 plus pounds per plant. My experience is that dozens of pounds of fruit per plant is not at all unreasonable. So there's a whole thing about spacing also, but the age of the seedling I think is also really important. We talked about soil temperature. If you add all these things up, what that means is you're going to be starting your seedlings later. What I like to do, I think I talked about this last time when it came to seed, was to cull seedlings. I said if you have tomatoes that some germinate in 5 to 7 days and some germinate in 12 to 14 days, you take all the ones that germinate in 12 to 14 days and you chuck them. Right? Those are the ones that are the runts. Those are the ones that have the flat seeds, that have the poor epigenetics from their mother. She was sickly, or very sickly. Functionally, you need many fewer tomato plants if you're giving them more space. So anyway, these are all the sort of permutations and concepts to integrate. There is no linear path like thou shalt do this instead of what thou hast been doing. But if you are willing to experiment and modulate and work towards taking some of these things on, I think you'll find what many people who've taken this course have found, which is that, holy shit, things can be a lot different than they have been.